Well, welcome everyone. My name is Maria Gastambide, and I am Director and Chief Curator of Public Art of the University of Houston System, which is one of the oldest and most significant university public art collections in the United States. I'm so happy that you're joining us today for the first installment of Color Talks, a monthly series of conversations where we connect virtually with the artists in color field. This is UH's first curated exhibition of outdoor sculptures. It is on view through May 2021, and it features 13 large-scale works by 7 contemporary artists whose variety of different approaches address issues related to color. Joining us today is the Texas artist Jeffie Brewer, who is based in Nacogdoches, and he'll be in conversation with Mike Guidry, Curator of Public Art of the University of Houston System. Before diving in, let us take care of some housekeeping issues. We've planned a 40 to 45 minute conversation followed by a question and answer session at the end. I'd like to encourage you to submit your questions at any time through the Q&A chat box, and Mike and Jeffie will try to get through as many as they can towards the end of the conversation. And we're also, we've set aside some time upon the conclusion for a quick survey. We hope you will participate in that as well. So with that, take it away, Mike and Jeffie.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Jeffie, for agreeing to participate in this conversation this evening. And I'd like to welcome and thank everybody for joining us. So I'll start with just a very short kind of biographical information on Jeffie. He was born and raised in East Texas, but currently lives and works in Nacogdoches, Texas. He received his BFA from Sam Houston State University in Huntsville in 1995. And then went on to Stephen F. Austin University, where he earned his MA in Sculpture and Materials in 1998, and then his MFA in Sculpture and Painting in 2000. He also taught at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches from 2007 to 2019, teaching sculpture, 3D design, drawing, and graphic design. And his work has been exhibited and collected all over the country. So thank you again, Jeffie. So I thought we would kind of start our conversation at the beginning, your childhood, because I think it's a pretty interesting one and fairly unique. So some folks may not know that your family owned a junkyard and you grew up in that environment, and it seems to have kind of was a huge influence on you growing up. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. You know, it sounds a lot more interesting than it was. It was actually terrifying. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to you, Michael, and thank you to Maria, and thank you to everybody at U of H. It's been a really fantastic. Thank you to the people at Crystal Bridges Museum, all the staff there, especially Alice and Glenn, for putting together a great show. But back to this growing up in a junkyard, which is terrifying. I had developed very on like 12 or 13, this skill set of, tearing stuff up, breaking things, crushing things, melting things. And I was able to, I always like this. When I do a talk, I start with this slide and I talk about my family, and I try not to make any jokes about it. And I just say, this is my mom and dad, and I grew up in a junkyard. And then I deadpan it and not go on and tell them, but since, you guys are on the joke. But it was like that. I was a feral child growing up in a junkyard, and I had the ability to do whatever I wanted to. And it really opened up my eyes to, what could be done with a hammer and a little bit of heat. And you could, destroy, make, just, see beauty and all of that. I remember specifically old cars, and there's some sort of beautiful nature to the 1950s and 60s cars, the sleek steel, the colors, and I think the ability to point that out and see that beauty was really interesting. Another really cool story about growing up in the junkyard that I like to tell is there was a gas station across from the junkyard. And I have a very vivid memory of, that kid, especially that kid right there. This gas station across the street, and it had candy at it. and I would go get this candy. And I was, like I said, I was feral. I could do this. Back in the 70s, you would let an 8-year-old child walk across a major thoroughfare to procure candy. So I have this very vivid memory of across the street was candy. And one day I'm looking across the street and everything's dusty, dirty Texas, right? And all of a sudden this storm blows in and it starts raining and it stops right between me and the candy store. And everything across the street in the candy store is clean and pristine and beautiful. And everything on my side is dirty and dusty. And I think about that very often. And this, I don't know what it really means. I need to see therapy for it, but I know that getting out of the junkyard was very important to my next step of being a human being, thinking about how I could do that with all the candy over there, clean, pristine, perfect. And then over here is junkyard. But yeah, back to that learning how to do things. I mean, I could drive a front end loader by the time I was 12 years old, or 8 years old. I could use a torch at 10, I could drive a drag line. I worked every summer at melting aluminum. What kind of kid has to do that? It was like child labor, I suppose.
And did you and your friends kind of create things, like make toys, make things to?
We were growing up in the middle of the Cold War, and we were always concerned about the end of the war. Reagan had us worried that the world was, coming to an end. The Soviets were going to get us. So we built a lot of forts and built a lot of things in the woods, and we, would. Our favorite thing to do, I remember probably around the age of 14 or 15, we would take these old junk cars and we would push them up to the top of the hill, and then we would crash them back down into. So there weren't a lot of toy making. It was more destruction. And out of that destruction, I think I learned the skill set for making things, refining that sort of thing down.
And having access to all of those materials and learning all those skills, it really must have kind of played into your creativity or helped your creativity kind of run wild.
It did. It also instilled in me a sense of that this was work, life was work, and things were serious too. It wasn't just, I was, like I said, I was an only child. I maybe not have said that. I was an only child growing up in the country, so I didn't have a lot of interaction with other human beings, and so there was a lot of having to figure out what to do. And I think that's where the art came from, as I learned I could draw relatively well. And I think that's the first step that got me into the actual arts, is I had this knack of being able to render something. And being alone a lot, that kind of got me to that next step of drawing all the time. And the next thing I know, I'm creating all the time.
Did all that kind of cumulative experience make you want to go to art school, or was there something else?
I did. I've never really deviated from that path of thinking creatively. I didn't know what it was back then because East Texas doesn't have a lot of outlets. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to have a couple of teachers along the way that facilitated that. But I don't think the actual act of the junkyard made me. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Even in 2 weeks before college started, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know that I wanted to do something in the arts. I knew that I loved art, and I always thought that I would be an artist. I never thought I would be anything else. But there was no catalyst. I kind of just have fallen into it my entire life.
That's interesting. So when we kind of had a conversation before this, you had talked about, I think it was your first visit to a museum, and you had this incredibly emotional experience in front of, I don't know if you were specific about what it was. Maybe it was a Van Gogh painting.
It was a Van Gogh, and I want to say it was Houston. It was the rocks piece. Maybe this has been 40 years, so it may be different. But I have a very distinct memory. I talk about this idea when I used to teach. I talk about the idea of an aesthetic response to something. We all have that sort of overcome with. But an 18-year-old redneck Jeff did not know what was happening to him, right? I'm in a museum, I'm with some friends. It's my first time to ever be around art, real art. I had seen things in books, but I wasn't aware. I was completely oblivious. But I remember standing in front of this Van Gogh, and I'd had an art class, and I understood who Van Gogh was, and I understood all these things. But looking at it, I'm just standing there, and I completely became absorbed with this thing. And the history of him, what little I knew about him, and just the beauty of the whole thing. I could see the brushstrokes, and I thought, this guy did this thing, and I was just taken over. And I'm standing there, and I'm 18, redneck Jeff, and I'm just bawling, and I can't control myself. And I see some of my friends, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to get beat up. I don't know what am I going to do about this? So I clean myself up, shake myself, go to the bathroom, but sequentially, it's happened to me several times throughout my life. I remember going to New York in my 30s and standing in front of Modigliani and just like weeping, or you hear the right song, or I'm a sensitive. I was at the doctor the other day. My surgeon, I had my knee operated on, and he was injecting something in my knee, and he said, "You're a HSP." I'm a highly sensitive person, so I think I'm just a highly sensitive person. So all you highly sensitive people out there, you're not alone.
I mean, I think that's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people have a lot of different kinds of experiences looking at art in a museum. Like I remember, going to, I went to the local museum when I was a kid growing up, but I think it wasn't until like I saw my first like Ferdinand Leger painting or my first Frank Stella painting that I kind of awestruck moment. I didn't cry, but it was like a full body kind of wow moment.
Yeah, I had an art history professor at Sam Houston, Daryl Patrick, was an amazing guy, still amazing guy, he's up, and he. Well, I remember he was really tough, and I remember him talking about something one day, and he mentioned this and was talking about maybe an aesthetics class. He was talking about the aesthetic response. We were talking about the how it works and all that, and it was so nice to have something to put that feeling with. How art can change you and make you feel a certain thing that nothing else can. So it was really cool and I'd say that specifically for our students in the crowd who pay attention. And if you don't pay attention to anything else, pay attention to art history class. It's very important to know where you're coming from. And it's so, it's so important to like see and understand the lineage of how art is get you to where you are right now. So, sorry.
That's an actual perfect segue because, I just wanted to show a couple of drawings because, you do make drawings.
That's mostly all I do. I would say that my sculptures almost fall into the drawing category. So
yeah. And even this is sort of an evolution.
Yeah, I like this one because it does show the process of how I get to where I'm going. So I prefer and enjoy the actual art or the act of making a mark. That to me is the most important thing. I feel like, doing this and losing myself in that is where it all comes from. And I do something that I like to call expressive drawing. It was taught to me by a beautiful friend of mine, John Daniels, one of my mentors. And you kind of just work and work and work. You work back into the drawing and you just keep going. And by the end of it, you're just layering up all this history of a drawing. And then out of that, you find something. And then I have I have a real solid thing. And then I manipulate that. And that brings in all this like graphic design and computer work that I have done in the past. It all kind of melds together, and I minimalize the form down even more. And then from that, I take it into the sculpture. So there's this real big process generally that goes through there. I just don't whip up a drawing of a weird little animal and call it.
I do want to come back to this, but there's something else, like speaking of kind of evolution, but your work has evolved quite a bit. So I understand like a lot of your early work was very, I don't know if you want to use the term academic or intellectual, and it was very minimal, and I think it had some Japanese influences, and you made that.
I think,
but
I'm sorry. I was going to say that brings me to that point of that I like to talk about a lot, is how I finally got to where I am. Is I was early on in my career, while I was in school and after school, I just wanted to make art for other people. I think that's what a lot of us do. Especially if we're going to grad school, we're making this academic thing and we're trying to please people and we're trying to get through our thesis and do this. Or even then after that, you're trying to please a critic, or you're trying to please everyone. And I had got to a point in my 30s where I just wasn't happy with what I was making. I have a very good memory of showing something to my mother, and she was so, like, I could see it on her face that she didn't get what I was doing. And I've had that interaction with other, like, friends and, people outside of the art world. The art world is so tiny. It's like 0.01%. And so I was making art for that 0.01%. And I remember just completely being kind of disgusted with the idea of art in general. So I took several years off and just didn't really make anything. And until I raised my nephew, I was probably, I don't remember, my 30s. But, he was 4 years old. He came to live with us. And so for 1 year, I'm with this 4-year-old raising a child. And that really shifted everything. I'm with this kid, seeing the world again through a child's eyes. And it was kind of nice. I kind of started doing these drawings with him. I had other friends. All my friends at that time had kids too. So I'm drawing with the, kids. Of course, I'm a big kid, so we're doodling up these things. And it felt so free to do that. So it really shifted the way I made art. And I saw it as I didn't have to please that 1%. And then once I had, kind of jumped back into the art world, I started making these kind of fun, playful drawings of animals and, especially birds. I was putting these birds in adult situations and almost cartoon-like. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend that runs an arboretum here in Nacogdoches, Dawn. We were talking about putting a piece in the arboretum. So I doodled up this bird shape and stuck it in the arboretum. And somebody stole it. And I thought, well, cool, I'll make something really big they can't steal. So that was where this whole mess comes from. My nephew and my friend Dawn basically got me into what I am now. I made this giant bunny shape. I stuck it in the arboretum. It was like 12 feet tall, 500 pounds. You can't steal it. Uh-huh. And after that is really when my eyes came flying open to the possibilities of what art was. Public art blew, like, my mind exploded, because you're bringing in a whole new crowd of people. You're bringing in just normal everyday people that don't go to museums and galleries, and you're showing them a world that is not necessarily something they're used to. And so you're bringing people into this fold. And I think it's really helped me get past a lot of things, because I can see the joy that it brings to other people when they look at my work. Another ramble, sorry.
No, that's a good ramble. So all those drawings that you were doing when you were raising your nephew, they were all just sort of intuitive and playful and kind of from the gut?
Yeah, I mean, they were just mostly, cartoonish. I mean, I remember building him a SpongeBob SquarePants room. Like we had an attachment onto what is now my studio, and I remember doing these kind of fun, playful cloud shapes and just weird, wacky waves and stuff all over the wall. And it was something so big of a departure from what I had been doing. It just felt really good and normal. And I had done a show of drawings with another friend of mine's child. He was about 4, and he would do a drawing, and then I would take that drawing and then blow it up and then add things to it. And so it was just so nice to get free of all that, the academic, the thoughts. I was just making stuff from the gut, and it felt really clean and good.
And you got a more kind of genuine and sincere response from people.
And another thing, as we get older, we don't really care either. So that helped a lot. But I did get a lot better response from people. I think that they can understand. I mean, most people can understand it, which it appealed to those people, but it also appeals to academics and people that are art people. And I think that was my goal at the time, but anymore it's not. I really don't care. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy making things still. So it's like, that's all that really matters to me,
Uh-huh. I think you care, Jeffie.
I do a little bit, but not as much as I used to.
So you had your first experience with public art, and that kind of, as you said, so talk about that a little bit. Like, how was that different from showing your work in a like in a gallery or museum kind of space? Like, how was the interaction with the audience? How was just even the kind of displaying of the work in an outdoor environment different to you?
Sure, it took the stuffiness out of it. I mean, I had to display that large thing in the Arboretum for about a year, and then I decided, this was really cool. I'm going to display it out in the world. So I had applied to a show in Charleston, South Carolina. It was a large outdoor show, and I put it in there, and I won, and I went out to visit it. And the day I went to install it, there were children there playing around, and there were like families, and it was like some sort of field day at this park.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really cool to watch this interaction. It was, so foreign to me from the gallery and the museum setting. And so it was like, oh yeah, I totally get this. It makes sense. And then since then, I've been able to do these kind of fun things and put them all over. And now it's really neat to think of them as like Wayfair signs, or I just recently put a piece in the Texas State Fair, and everyone there like loved it. And the people would write me and say, we just loved it was a giant rhino. And they were saying, we use it to tell people to go down to the big rhino and take a ride. And it's just so much more fulfilling for me. It's about me, I guess.
And you can play with scale in a way that can be very kind of prohibitive in like a gallery setting.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. I am somewhat limited in that as far as like monetarily, structurally, I'm kind of limited to a larger than human scale, car size, what I can transport. But it's still, it's big, it's interactive. I like the idea of people interacting with them. I don't mean climbing all over them, but I mean like how they interact with the landscape, how they interact with, people taking selfies and doing what people do nowadays. It's also fun to take this this is about color. I take this, the landscape, and plop this one little bright color in a space that's generally not colorful. And I wasn't really a color crazy person, but I liked the idea of a large scale painting with a little dot of color in it. And I think of it that sort of way. I think of it as like here's this big broad landscape, and with this little dot of color in it to bring a little joy, a little happiness in the space.
Yeah, it is. When outdoor spaces, it's either, greenery or trees, or it's, very often kind of unremarkable architecture. And so when you put something like this, outside, it's transformative in a kind of a powerful way. And it also makes people just look at everything around it very differently.
Yes. And another thing that I enjoy is the actual challenge of taking something and manipulating it in a way that speaks to me and reads as mine. I think if you see one of mine, generally one of my sculptures out in public, you go, oh, that's Jeffie's sculpture. I hope that I'm not derivative of too many things. I know that I've seen some other work out in the world that kind of looks similar, but I think it does speak for itself, and it looks like mine.
It does. And you certainly, there's a lot of things that influence this work. I think you mentioned earlier your, kind of background in design and illustration, your interest in pop culture, all this kind of goes into these.
Yeah, it took me a long time to get to the point that I'm at. I was probably 40 before I figured it out. I wish I'm like a late bloomer in that aspect. It kind of took all these things to come together for me to be able to make something that I feel like, oh yeah, this is it. But it did take 10 years of working with my wonderful, beautiful wife, Angie. And it took, teaching for 20 years. It took, dealing with all the things that you deal with in life to figure out to get this point, to figure out that I didn't want to make everybody happy, but I did want to make people happy, But yeah, it's been fun.
I'm sure it has been. It seems like you have a kind of a very personal relationship with your sculpture, because you sometimes call them your kids.
Yeah.
Birded in that way.
It's tough to. Once I let them go, I let them go. I enjoy seeing photographs, and I get to but I'm not like, once it's made, I'm okay with sending it out in the world. They reach adulthood relatively quickly.
They grow up fast.
Yeah, they do. But how cool is that to have a piece out in front of the Mercedes-Benz Superdome? I mean, that's like.
I know, that's fantastic.
And actually, this piece is probably one of the reasons why I'm in the show, The Color Fields. I know Allison had a connection with New Orleans, and
Yeah.
thankfully.
Yeah, and she saw this piece and learned about you, I guess.
Yeah, it's the hustle.
It is the hustle.
Getting the work out there.
Uh-huh. And some of it's being in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. You know, I would say that would be one of the biggest things I would say to students is just say yes. I mean, don't say yes to everything, but say yes a lot. And know that it is a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount of work. And it is total hustle, and nobody's in your corner. I mean, there are very few people, and you've got to find those few people that are in your corner and supportive. But it's a real tough road. It is a hard road.
It's a very hard road for most artists. I mean, very few make a living from it or gain any sort of notoriety or critical acclaim. I mean, honestly, I mean, there's, millions or hundreds of thousands of artists that just, they're still working.
I'm very fortunate that I can, I get to eat cookies because of art. I am a trophy hunter too, but that doesn't, obviously I'm not a very good trophy.
You are to someone. All right, so we're going to look at some of your work on campus.
Cool.
So here we've got Cloud and Pink Sexy, which are located in Wilhelmina's Grove. So, if you start the tour kind of at one of our recommending spots, which is Wilhelmina's Grove on the north side of campus, this is first sculptures all the visitors are going to see is these two pieces.
Yeah, well, the story behind Cloud is that story about the clouds rolling in and the rain and the clean. That's where my, the iconic cloud comes from, is that sort of thing. Pink Sexy was from a drawing from a sketchbook that I had done probably 20 years ago. And the image, it always comes back to me, and I just have wanted to make it. And finally I just said, hey, I'm going to make it. And it's been, I really like. I don't know why I like it. I mean, it's the figurative aspect. It's non-representational, which a lot of the times my work that gets shown has some sort of representational, animals or figurative something. So it's fun to show the non-representational work too.
Yeah, and this is a new addition to the exhibition. This wasn't part of Color Field at Crystal Bridge.
Yeah, I had a large red head that was it was called Bad Hair Day. And then it was not taken to Florida, and then it ended up it's in Kingsville, Texas, which I need to go pick that up. So if anybody's in Kingsville and wants to bring me a sculpture.
Will it fit in a pickup?
No, probably not. Maybe.
Yeah, Pink Sexy is curious. It's also, people love it. They love the title. It's a very curious form. Like you said, it's figurative, but it also looks like a tool. And I'll tell you something very funny. You'll appreciate it. I hope you appreciate it.
Of course, I love everything.
When our art conservator came, after everything was installed, he came to start, kind of cleaning and doing touch-ups. And he looked at this and he said it reminded him of the wishbone salad dressing.
Oh yeah, totally.
Logo.
Is that Robert and John and Randy? Is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you to those guys. I forgot to mention them by name. They did a fantastic job. There was a little ding-ups in transit, so that was perfect.
Yeah. And then this is Pop. This is actually one of your monsters, as you call it.
Yeah, this is Pop. I had done a series of drawings. I had a really good friend. He was suffering from Alzheimer's, and to watch somebody go through that is brutal. And so I had done some drawings of that, and I called it Pity the Monsters. And it's just dealing with the monster of that disease, and then the monster that sometimes people become because of that disease. And it's really tough. And then from that, I don't know, I couldn't stop. And so I was drawing more and more monsters, and I was keeping them playful, not scary. This one was one of the early ones. I was asked by a group in Stamford, Connecticut, to do 3 pieces for a show, and so this was one of the 3. But it's a beast. It's like 12 or 14 feet tall. It's just
Yes, it is.
But it's one of the older ones. I jokingly said that I was going to retire him after this show and put him out a field somewhere, let him relax.
Let him retire.
Let him just have a time.
Oh, wait, sorry. And we've got 3 more of yours in the same location where Pop is, which is called Butler Plaza, right in the middle of our campus.
That's Kitty, and of course, you know, I've done several dogs throughout the year, and I've always had this shape of a like this real kind of, it goes along with the bunny, this kind of really deadpan, straightforward. Mm-hmm. It's just hilarious to make something giant and stick it somewhere. You know, it's, for me, it's just too funny. You're like scrolling along. Here's this 1-foot kitty head. It's
right.
And it's such a, you know, it's fun to like plop them down in really cool places like this too. It's I get a kick out of it.
Yeah, we love this grouping here, kind of among the trees. So yeah, it's like these critters, you know, out in the woods.
At the end of the monster phase, it's kind of a giraffe mixed with a monster. I've always enjoyed the shape. I've made a few of these, none this big. But I like the dumb arches as legs. It's just a silly thing. You know, when I do the drawings, I see them on the paper and they're, you know, this big, and it's like, you know, it would be cool to make this 15 feet tall. You can't. Once something's big, there's this old adage in the sculpture world: you can't make it good, make it big. If you can't make it big, you know, paint it red. If you can't paint it red, I don't know what the next thing is. But just throw a bunch of colors on it. It's cool, like Kimberly says.
Yeah, and how much, so kind of back to color, like when you're thinking about, you know, like Kitty and Jagaf and Bunny and, you know, like around with color, like when you made this Bunny or Jagaf, did you immediately think like that needs to be that weird kind of peachy Pepto-Bismol pink color, or?
You know, I've limited my palette down. I used to try to like have a bunch, but I've narrowed it down. There are like maybe 8 or 10 colors that I really like. And I tie all the colors to something nostalgic for me. I have
like what?
You know, like there's a color of a car that I really like that's in some of it's like a tealish color. There's a blue that I use. This is a story, so I'm sorry. My 16-year-old dog is over here, and she's embarrassed for me. I know it. She's like, she's drinking water, making me very loud about it. So I have this story I'm going to tell you real quick. I'll be fast. My grandmother, Rosalie Davis. I have a very vivid memory of Rosalie Davis. She was arthritic, 70s, crunched over, typical Texas grandma. You know, she was a sharecropper, just like. Okay, so she's, we're going to kill a chicken. This story requires a chicken being killed. And so we're going out the door, and I have a very vivid memory of her turning into a super ninja and like doing acrobatic things to catch this chicken, to wring its neck, chop its head off. And then I have a visual of this. Her little flour sack dress has this blue color on it. And there's this red blood of the chicken and this white chicken. And it's always stuck in my head. I have an artist statement that talks about this. And I talk about that this is love. This visual that I have is love of this act that's happening. But I still have it pierced in my head. And that color blue is something so beautiful to me. And it's so subtle. That's where color comes from me. Little nostalgic, weird stuff like that.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
But there's all kinds of like, you know, there's the color pink. I had a pair of loafers in high school that were that color pink. And anybody that knows me from my high school days, I was a very odd kid for a small town in East Texas. There were like 78 people in my graduating class. And here I am with pink loafers. So
that's wonderful. You know, I think a lot of artists who like think about color often, they some of them like have these systems for selecting color or, but I think having this sort of like bank of nostalgic colors from your life to kind of use is that's really interesting.
Well, there's also like pairings of colors, and then there's also the technical aspect of color, especially on making these things. It's hard to find. It's like I talked about that with you earlier. It's the holy grail of public art is to get a color that is color fast, that holds, that doesn't fade, that doesn't crack, that doesn't do all these things. And so I work with a local here in Nacogdoches paint company, and I'm always trying to like push into the next level. What can I get it brighter? I need it to be more saturated, and it's really tough to do. I'm checking our time. Oh, we're doing good.
We're doing okay.
But yeah, bright colors. I'm all about it. And
they work for these pieces. I mean, the color choices for these, kind of creatures are really, they're kind of lovely. And I like that, like this trio here of, Kitty and Bunny and Jagaff are kind of like almost like the primary colors together.
Some of those colors are really difficult to achieve. I know the yellow one is especially, to get a really bright color, you have to take out the white and you have to like get in there to get pigment and to lay that on over the top of a metal substrate. It's, I'm putting like 7 or 8 coats of paint on just to kill out anything underneath it. So it's laborious. And I steer away from like powder coating and auto body paints just for the technical aspect of getting to site and then having it messed up somehow and then I have to repaint it. So this way I can, hit it with a roller or a brush and touch it up really easy. So
yeah, even those practical things like that is super helpful for the people that kind of even come behind you.
Yes. Well, and that's another thing. I mean, I work, my studio is, I do all my work in my studio. I don't job anything out. And I have a couple of assistants that help me who I love like family. And so it's really nice to be able to just work, keep everything in house. And then I worry about all the things like, is this going to be engineered correctly? I don't want it falling on anybody. I don't want it to be a hazard. I don't want people, is this too close for somebody to step on, to get over, to get up to, I worry about all this stuff all the time. I see a lot of art that is, poorly designed in that aspect. They think only about the aesthetic and they don't worry about the technical aspects of, that's going to whack somebody in the head or that's going to do this, that, or the other. So, I'm a nerd on that aspect, the only part that I'm a nerd about.
Well, people like us appreciate that kind of thing.
Wow.
Because you can't control the public's behavior and they will climb on things.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. My favorite is people tag me in them. They'll be like 15 feet in the air standing on top of it. I'm like, I do not condone it. It's not a smart move.
So just in the interest of time, there's because it looks like there's a lot of questions and comments that are popping up. But you had kind of talked about like mentors and advice a little earlier, but I think that's important because we're at a university. We have a lot of students that are listening, I hope, and I think it's important for them to kind of listen to working professional artists and kind of share things you've learned throughout your life and career. So even if you just want to talk for a few minutes about mentors that were important to you or advice you've learned along the way that you like to pass on.
I think about, I taught for a long time, so I tried to be a good mentor to students. I think about it more as like building really good friendships, like trying to keep, because nowadays it's hard, when you're 50, you don't have mentors anymore. You have friends that you say, hey, if I do this, will I die? And they go, probably. So it's good to have set up with that. Have somebody that you can have that dialogue with. Have somebody that you can ask the questions to, and then you can have that back and forth with. I was lucky early on to have a couple of really good people that tell me, do this, do that. I had a wonderful lady, Eloise Adams. She told me to use the name Jeffie Brewer. I was I was vacillating between calling myself Jeff, and she was like, "Stay with Jeffie," and I was like, "Gonna do it." And that, it was a really good move for me. I've had some success just because my name is silly. I'm okay with that. It's, my big tips that I tell students is if you want to make it in the art world, there are three things, and you only have to be really good at two of those things. And they are as followed. You have to make something that people want to see. That's it. You have to be on time, and you don't be a jerk. That's it. You can be two of those things, and you will make it, or at least you'll have a better shot at it.
I think that's great advice for all of us. Two of them, at least, for the non-artists.
But you have other little things like
Don't be a jerk.
Well, you can be a jerk as long as you're on time. For those of you that are late all the time, don't be a jerk. There's other things, say yes to as much as that you can. And, it's a job. It really is a job, and you have to treat it like a job. You can't treat it as a hobby. You can't piddle. You have to just do it and find people that are going to facilitate that and help you with that. Find people that you can definitely springboard things off of. Find people that will tell you that it sucks. It's hard to do. I was always, for the longest time, I was the professor that said, "That's terrible." And on the flip side of that, it's good to find people that tell you that things are good too. Because if you have a guy like me all around saying you suck all the time, it's not good. You got to find somebody too that says you're doing a good job and that motivates you. I've tried to switch over to be that guy now that I don't teach anymore. If people reach out to me, I try to be positive about their situation. But I still have a little bit of me that's like, maybe you should be a lawyer or or something like that. I'm off on a tangent. So
Sometimes be good advice.
not everybody needs art school, buddy.
Okay, so we've got some questions if you'd like to move on to that, Jeffie.
Sure.
One of the first questions that came up very early was, how do you develop your relationships or choose which galleries represent you?
I learned on my own, and it's been a really tough road. It is a crapshoot. You can find out stuff about galleries online, but you just really have to build a relationship with a gallery. I've been fortunate that I have a few galleries that I trust, but they're making money off of you. I have lots of friends that forego the gallery situation, but it is a really nice way to get your stuff out there. There's some venues like my gallery in Santa Fe. It's really, really fun to see that the stuff is out there and it's there and it's accessible to people. With the same one in Florida and in Dallas. When you drive by and there it is, it's somewhere that you can tangibly get a hold of it. So find a place that you can trust would be my big yes.
We've got another question about pop art, and they are wondering if that is one of your favorite styles.
To be honest, I hate most art. I really do. I can't stand art. No, I know pop art. I don't really think it's. You guys in Houston are so lucky. You have the Menil collection, and then you have the Cy Twombly Museum. I think if I have a mecca or a thing that I am attracted to, if I could go back in time, I would be a fly in Cy Twombly's studio. Just the intellectual, the thoughtfulness, the beauty of it, that would be it for me. But pop art, I enjoy some of it. It's where it is in the pantheon of art. I enjoy it. It just depends. Catch me on the right day. It is a good one. Today I'm feeling more sanguine.
That's curious that you say Cy Twombly, because it's. I bet a lot of people are surprised to hear that.
Well, it's what I am attracted to visually is nothing like what I do. I don't think, and I don't particularly care for things that look like my stuff. One of my favorite artists right now is Wayne White. I don't know if you're familiar with Wayne White. I have a Wayne White painting behind me right here that says all the stupid shit I've said, which I'm probably going to look at long and hard after this talk. But no, I like a lot of different things. You catch me on a different day, it would be something completely different. But I think Cy Twombly fits in there every day. Antonio Tapies, there's a lot of like minimalist, that stuff that I poo-pooed, I still find very beautiful and interesting to look at.
Okay, and there's a very curious question here. Are you related to Cynthia Brewer?
Maybe.
Okay, because they say I'm a computer programmer and a color palette I often is called Color Brewer, creative brewer. Anyways, this person was just curious.
We probably genetically down the line both suffer from some sort of like blind, like you can't see the right colors. We're overcolored, not color blind, but overcolored.
Okay. Another question about like who are some of your other favorite artists?
As my friends, a lot of my friends that are artists, I'm supportive of them, and I love the way they make. I love their passion for art. But as far as like artists go, I don't know, sanguine. I don't know. I have a painting on my wall. There's a fellow by the name of John Storm. He's not, he's a graduate from SFA, and I have probably 5 or 6 of his pieces. I love his work. Look up John Storm. I'm going to plug John Storm. Beautiful, fun, playful, kind of a little bit derivative of pop art, but yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, we had some other kind of similar questions, but I think you've answered them. There were a few others about pop art, but I think you've addressed that.
Well, no, and don't get me wrong. I love. It's something that it's like abstract expressionism or color field paintings. I mean, it's like something that you take in early on and you love it and you digest it, and then you kind of move around and you find other things that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I have a color field story. I was at the Menil collection once, and there was a Barnett Newman. Is that right? Barnett Newman? Yes. Mm-hmm. And it was torn. His little zip went like this, and then it just went off to the side. And the conservator was talking about it and talking about they knew so much about Barnett Newman, and they said that how much he would be so disappointed in that his zip wasn't perfectly straight, and that always stuck with me. That's my color field sidebar. I like Rothko. What am I talking about?
Well, Jeffie, I don't think we have any more questions. There were certainly a lot of comments about, people were commenting through the conversation. But I think you've got.
I had fun.
You're listening in.
If anybody that's listening or any of the students have any questions, I give this offer up to I give a public talk. You get 3 free questions. After that, I charge. You're welcome to hit me up on my website, and I'll answer anything you want. If it's a creative question, I'll give you an honest critique. I will tell you whatever I have. It may not be worth anything, but I'm happy to help anybody out. Anybody that's dumb enough to be an artist is a friend of mine.
Someone is asking, are you planning to see the show in person at U of H?
I would love to see the show in person. Hopefully, it's my trips to Houston are pretty, it's the biggest city close by. So that's where I get all my culture, what little I get. I go to the MFA and then I hit all the museums. But I anticipate coming down before it closes and checking it out. It looks so beautiful in the photographs. I'm afraid to do it. I see we got my best friend is actually a 4-year-old. My friend Lauren Selden's child, Izzy. We do a lot of. I've taught her that I do what I want is a correct thing to say.
Oh, another curious question. Can you talk more about how your work kind of has taken on a digital life through photography and selfie culture? How do you like seeing your work that way?
I appreciate it. It's good. I mean, my work is kind of two-dimensional in that it is basically that extruded. And so it has that kind of, and it also has the graphic quality. I think the years of working in graphic design made me very aware of logos and, breaking things down to very simplified forms. So that transposes over very nicely into digital. And I think it also gives somebody something to like attach onto, so they're not just being narcissistically taking pictures themselves.
Mm-hmm. They do photograph very well. That was another curious kind of observation I had when I first saw the work in person. They're they're only 6 inches thick.
Yeah,
they all read as silhouettes in the landscape. It's very
they're anywhere from 2 to up to. I've made some that are a couple of feet deep, but for the most part, those up there are 6 to 8 inches deep. Yeah. And they do. I had a critic once say that I didn't need to make them because I could just do the drawings, and that always stuck with me. But there wouldn't be sculptures then. But I like the idea of them in a space. And what the worst part is if I'm ever in a magazine, they always for some reason shoot it like this, and so I'm like, there's a blue line, and I can go, oh look, there's one of my sculptures. It's the big blue line. They shoot it because the other sculptures are around, and there's the blue line.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, we did it.
We had a practical question about, yes, they are down. Each one is bolted down with 4 bolts and nuts.
They are, yes. We use expansion joints, and I think maybe some epoxy in those joints to make sure a solid fit. I think those pads are probably 400 or 500 pounds. The bases that I make them so much so that it's hard to push over with just the base. Mm-hmm. I think about that. I don't want anybody dying underneath my sculptures. So the practical aspect of, making them not easy to knock over.
Yeah, and someone else, the last question was, they say they're so inviting, do you have to keep kids from climbing on them?
And that's to be a little bit expected. You can't control that. So.
Yeah, I mean, we don't encourage people to climb on them, but again, people do what they want to do, and it's very hard to control them when you're not looking.
Absolutely.
But, so I personally appreciate how well they're made. So that if people do, the likelihood of damage is pretty.
Yeah. I have a good friend, Robbie Barber, who teaches at Baylor University, and he said to me once, I make them so that the entire Baylor football team couldn't destroy them. And that stuck with me. And so my goal is to make them so the Baylor football team, or anybody with a bat, could not destroy. They're made of 10-gauge steel. You would have to really run them over, I believe, to destroy them.
Well, Jeffie,
we did it.
I think we did it.
Thanks to the people that stayed around and heard the whole thing. I'm sorry. It's the 5 o'clock news, which is basically sad stuff. So you didn't miss anything.
Yeah. Encourage people to go watch something else.
Thank you guys so very much.
Thank you again, Jeffie. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to everybody about your work. And
Absolutely.
I hope everybody enjoyed it and learned a little something about you, and gained a little more of an appreciation.
All right. I look forward to seeing you guys in Houston someday.
All right. Thanks again, Jeffie, and good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.